So welcome to the Lead for Pollinators Creating Pollinator Habitat webinar series. I'm Michele Colopy, Executive Director of Lead for Pollinators. Our webinars are supported by the following sponsors: Hispanic Marketing and Public Relations. Visit HispanicMPR.com for interviews, presentations, and more. Beauty Beyond Belief Seeds specializes in wildflower seeds, heirloom vegetable seeds, grass seeds, regional wildflower seeds, and special use wildflower mixes, including their line of 4 great pollinator mixes. Shop for your garden and pollinator habitat at bbbseed.com. 2 Million Blossoms magazine will awaken readers to the vast diversity of pollinating insects and animals. This quarterly magazine will delight, entertain, and name those well-adapted creatures buzzing through our world. Because the more we know about pollinators, the better we can provide habitat. This quarterly magazine explores how bees, birds, butterflies, and bats enhance our planet. Subscribe today using the discount code word LEAD and receive $5 off the subscription rate for 1 year. Visit 2millionblossoms.com. OPN Seed has partnered with Lead for Pollinators with pollinator mixes created for beekeepers and anyone who wants to attract and support pollinators. You can get native seeds for eastern U.S. planting zones at OPN Seed. Go to the Lead for Pollinators website and select the Donor Affiliations page to order your pollinator habitat seeds. Select Support Our Cause to view featured seed selections, and a portion of sales generated from our website will help support our work. Live webinar presentations are recorded and can be viewed through our partner at Dove Audiovisual. Webinars will be posted 48 hours after the scheduled presentation date for pay-per-view. Missed a webinar? You can view these topics through our pay-per-view access. Visit our website for the recorded Log In to Learn webinars and select the topic today. Our presentation today focuses on outdated noxious weed ordinances in our communities and how they constrain the development of pollinator habitat. You will learn how to determine if your community has such an ordinance, how to develop partnerships to build community support to change these outdated, unscientific ordinances, and how to educate and advise local policymakers by speakers with experience from both sides of the issue. Joining me for this webinar is Charlotte Ekker Wiggins. She was elected to her local governing city council for 4 two-year terms from 1999 to 2007. She has also successfully worked with her community on a number of campaigns, from establishing an animal shelter to building a multi-million-dollar recreation center. In 2015, she was Missouri State Beekeeping Association's Beekeeper of the Year for working with a team to update Missouri's honey laws. She has a master's degree in management from Webster University, St. Louis. She currently is an author of beekeeping books, volunteers at the State Beekeeping Association's Partnership Liaison, and co-manages an educational nonprofit bee club. So we're breaking up this presentation, and there was Charlotte waving to you, into kind of 2 sections. So I'm going to talk about the nuisance ordinance and the problem, because I personally experienced issues with it. And then Charlotte is going to bring in her expertise on how we can make those changes, reach out to those policymakers, and ensure that pollinators get the habitat they need. Now, I do want to encourage everybody that throughout the presentation, we have little signs up. There's a little picture of different pollinator habitat signs that you can get, or programs that you can register your habitat with. And then in the handout we emailed everyone is a link to all of those programs. And then certainly if you want to see if you have a pollinator habitat certification or registration program in your community, simply Google your state pollinator habitat certification programs. So let's start with certainly noxious weeds. hence the lead of this presentation, because you can go and find a list of state noxious weeds through the USDA. There's the link there, and I do have that in the handout. And I chose just these 3 states because a lot of our folks are from these 3 states who are attending our webinar series. So certainly in Ohio, they have PNWs, prohibited noxious weeds. In Iowa, they have primary noxious weeds. And in Virginia, they just went with NW, called noxious weeds. So you'll have some diversity in those weed lists based on primary or secondary. So choose your state, look at what your state looks at as noxious weeds, but because it will give you a starting point as to what noxious weeds are a problem in your community, because it might be slightly different where you live. Because based on your state, if it's heavily agricultural in one area of the state, they might have some other more specific plants they consider noxious because it causes problems in agriculture, whether for grazing animals or for the machines and things they use in the crop fields. So make sure you also check your community list as well. So you can see that a number of those are, well, if you're a beekeeper, if you are someone who likes to plant for pollinators, many of those plants are attractive to pollinators. Now, when I looked up in my community, the city of Akron, Ohio, for our noxious weeds, it was easy enough to do a search via just simply City of Akron ordinances. You know, you could go to the whole Muni code thing, but every community is going to be different as to where they house these ordinances online. So just make your life easy and do a simple browser search for your city name. But keep in mind, like with my community, Akron, there are 13 other Akrons in the United States. So make sure you add the state to your search as well. Now you can see in this noxious weed ordinance, it lists the plants they do not want any owner or person in charge of land to permit to grow: ragweed, field daisies, goldenrod, burdock, yellow dock, dandelions, thistles, jimson weeds, milkweeds, polygonum, mullein, poison ivy, poison oak, or other weeds or grasses of rank growth. Now, I'm not sure what rank growth is, but again, they don't want really grasses growing more than 8 inches in height in your yard. And that is one of the differences also in my community. You have to understand, and you may have that differentiation in your own, there are limitations of what you can grow in your yard, but if you have a tree lawn, or there's the utility right of way, so that if you have your yard and then a sidewalk and then a strip of lawn area, that might be called your tree lawn, or in our neck of the woods, it's a devil strip, you're going to have different guidelines for that. So these are the wonderful plants you cannot grow. Now, certainly daisies and goldenrod, milkweeds, we need those for pollinators. So when we look at some of these noxious weeds, you can see that all of these are beneficial and or attractive to pollinators. And it's not just honeybees. We're never just talking honeybees here. It's bees, wasps, it's also ants, beetles, flies that also help to pollinate, certainly butterflies, moths, but also many of these plants, when they go to seed in the fall, are then food for the birds, either at the end of fall as their birds are migrating south, or food for the winter. Now, many of these plants, like milkweeds, you know, they have got to have it for that lifespan of the monarch butterflies. So these are valuable plants. Now, in my community, there's no scientific rationale for why they chose all of those plants. And certainly when we look at daisies, I don't think a lot of people realize there are 23,000 species of daisies. My city in Akron does not define, they say field daisies. Ooh, it's not defining which daisy it really is out of 23,000 species of daisies. I personally think it was somebody in the 1960s who just didn't like what his neighbor was planting, and that's what he put in the list. So when we look at also the other part of this noxious weed concern is the maintenance and repair of sidewalks, curbs, and gutters. Now, this is again in my community, but you may also have this in addition to your own community's noxious weed ordinance if you have something called a devil strip or a tree lawn, and that's what the red arrow is pointing at. So in the picture, my yard is to the left, of the sidewalk. I'm really bad with left and rights. So that my yard is to the left of the sidewalk, and the devil strip, that's just what we call it in our community. Some people call it a hell strip, some it's a tree lawn. So in the devil strip in our community, nothing can be taller than 4 inches. Even some freshly mown grass there is taller than 4 inches. So, but this is the city's guideline. Now, many of these ordinances or nuisance ordinances are there so that if the city has to take action against someone horribly violating it, then they take action. Meanwhile, it often pits neighbor against neighbor because there is no reason to get rid of, there really isn't, my daisies or milkweed growing in my devil strip just because they're taller than 4 inches, except for this stupid ordinance. So when we look at devil strips, you can see about 20 years we started planting in this community. People on small lots started putting their gardens in their front yard. They started gardening in the devil strip. You can see from these pictures, people have done a lot of different plants, and they included daisies and milkweed and goldenrod in all of these devil strip areas. This last picture down in the lower right is actually in a business district that the city is trying to rejuvenate. And it has a lot of noxious weeds in that devil strip. And actually across the street is a whole plot of milkweed that the city itself planted. So you will see that throughout my concerns that I had with the City of Akron's Noxious Weed Ordinance is the city violates the ordinance themselves. Now, again, people are confused by the devil strip. We actually have a magazine in town called the Devil Strip. So it's just a colloquial thing of what we call that area between the sidewalk and the street. For us, it's the devil strip. So my yard, even when I first moved into my house, I've been here more than 20 some years, 24 years. I originally just planted the devil strip because that's what people were doing in Akron. And I received these wonderful little Keep Akron Beautification certificates. Keep Akron Beautiful is like Keep America Beautiful, so it's kind of an extension of that program. And I was always receiving these awards, and these awards were given at the guidance of the local city council person who drove through his ward and would nominate people for beautification awards. So again, the city knew what I was planting, where I was planting, and they even rewarded me for it. Again, big contradiction in what was going on there. So recently, when I started putting in my habitat, then I did get it certified by the Cincinnati Zoo. And certified really is you show them a picture, you tell them what is all there. I certainly had enough documentation to prove that it is, yes, a pollinator habitat. They are part of one of those pollination, trying to plant hundreds, if not thousands, of pollinator gardens across the country in order to support that, really, the migratory route also of monarchs. So I have one of these certificates validating my pollinator habitat. Now, about 3 years ago, now, again, as that last picture said, I've had a pollinator habitat from 2014. But 3 years ago, a new neighbor moved in, catty corner from me, so across the street and catty corner from me. And he moved into, the house he moved into was right next to a master gardener. Now, there is a house behind all of those plants you see there. There really is a house. You can see the little kind of gazebo thing in the front. You'll see that his tree lawn is planted. Well, the neighbor to this gentleman, this master gardener, complained to the city and said that the devil strip was a nuisance, and this master gardener was forced to remove everything in his devil strip because of a grumpy neighbor. And this is one of the things that I started working with the city, trying to get this noxious weed ordinance changed so that someone would mediate between the homeowner, one neighbor versus the other. There was not a darn thing wrong with that guy's, the master gardener's devil strip. It wasn't blocking anyone's traffic as they pulled the car out of the driveway. It was just one neighbor didn't like what the other was doing. And this master gardener just has entire square footage of his front yard planted. So it's where the sun is. So 2 years ago, I started working with 2 city councilmen as part of urban ag ordinances here in the community, because we have a lot of uh, more of the older parts of the city where there are food deserts for the community members. So they were doing large community gardens. There were groups that were doing urban farming, but we needed to redo the urban ag ordinances. People wanted to keep chickens again and things like that. So we had an instant coalition that developed because the city of Akron tried to institute a new registration fee for beehives and for chickens, and it was going to be $50 per chicken and $50 per beehive. So the chicken and the bee keeping people got together with the urban ag people, and we put a stop to that hike in the registration fees. And then we developed this coalition to work with 2 city councilmen to work on revamping the urban ag ordinances for community gardens, for urban farming, as well as for beekeeping and chickens in the city. Now, in working with these 2 city councilmen, pre-COVID, there were so many delays. The council people, we would work with them for about 3 months, and then, oh, now it's September, we have to work on the election. So from September to December, actually November, they would use the election as the excuse, and then they go, okay, some people are lame ducks, so we aren't going to do anything. So then it would start up again in about February. So we had a lot of lost time due to delays by the council. Then we kept trying to get meetings with the law department, and they kept stalling us. We kept sending them documents, they would lose them. They would then ask for a different document. They would want to see beekeeping ordinances and urban farm ordinances from cities comparable to our size, which we'd already given them, and then they'd ask for a different city. So there were a lot of delays. There was a lot of confusion, really, because the council people and the law department did not understand beekeeping or farming. They had no clue. And we were also working on the Noxious Weed Ordinances with this. And we were also trying to get our city to become a Bee City USA as well. So we were probably trying to do too much at once. But even our city council people that we were working with said, if anything gets to the law department, it dies. So it's very difficult to get legislation through the law department. That just seems to be the culture in our community. Now, when COVID hit and things were kind of closed down in last year, my goldenrod took off because it just loves where it's growing. And I received a nuisance complaint about my yard and not the tree lawn, because I took that out after the master gardener was told to take his out. But there was complaints about my yard from the same guy. So thankfully, because I had worked with these 2 city council people, they did call the nuisance department on my behalf and say, look, can you just delay this? We're working with her on these things. So they did at least delay. And in one sense, the pandemic helped because I could only do an appeal hearing and presentation over Zoom. So things got delayed. Instead of it being dealt with in July, it was October. And the goldenrod had finished by then, so I was able to knock down everything. So in the end, I did meet their guideline. But my plants are going to return this year. So I do need to develop a new strategy, which certainly Charlotte's going to talk about. And if you want to find out what it was like for me to put together my yard and do it, put in the habitat, it's been going for 8 years strong. You can look at my video, the pay-per-view video on transforming a grassy yard through our website. So you can find out how to put in your own habitat that way. But you do want to look at those nuisance ordinances. And I'm certainly going to be working on a new strategy for this year with my ordinances and my habitat, because that goldenrod's going to come back. But certainly we're going to talk and hear from now Charlotte Wiggins on how she has dealt with many of these things as certainly a city council person.
Just want to make sure that I was unmuted. Good. I'm so glad I was not on the city council when somebody would propose a $50 per chicken fee, okay? That would be cause for civil war in my community. Yeah. Now, I live in Rolla, Missouri. I call it the belly button of Missouri. It's between St. Louis, Springfield, Columbia, major metropolitan areas. It's a small college town, 25,000 population. but we have a combination of the kinds of community issues that you see in larger communities because of the university. And then we have the more local types of issues like, can you walk your chicken down Pine Street, you know, on a Sunday? We do, by the way, have an ordinance about that here. So what I'm just listening to what Michele talked about, and I can understand the frustration with trying to do that. And I would say, stay focused, okay? That's probably the most important lesson, because a lot of times when I was on the city council and somebody would come to us and make a presentation, we wouldn't hear from them again. They would not, I say, tie a string to that and stay with it. Because if you do your homework, you then can become the expert in this particular issue. And as you develop the relationships that you're going to need to be able to move this forward, people will then start coming to you for help on the particular issue, which is what you want.
Right.
Now, remember that there are three reasons for laws, right? You have laws because you want community safety, sometimes community standards. You know, a lot of the magazine laws from the 70s was all about were magazines pornographic or not. Those were all thrown out by the Supreme Court. But so you have community standard laws, you have ones that are protecting the safety, and then you have nuisance laws, and those tend to be complaint driven. In other words, somebody before you didn't like something somebody else was doing somewhere, like walking their chicken down Pine Street on a Sunday, and decided to propose to their councilman, their ward representative on the city government board, whatever that is, to stop that. So your challenge now is going to become to come on to the scene, be the expert, and explain to the people who make decisions why your proposal is better than either the one they have on the books or the one that they even sporadically enforce. So what I say is, do your homework. You need to know your local ordinances better than anybody else on that governing board. You need to know your state laws, because somebody's going to come along and say, well, what does the state say? You need to identify the alternatives you want. Don't let them come up with a solution, because that's more dangerous. That can be worse than what you have. So look at what other communities your size are doing. Look at what other communities have been successful in changing their laws so that you can have a model, and take pictures. You will be surprised at how you can change somebody's mind by showing them a before and an after photo, or just say, this is what a devil strip is. When Michele showed me that, I went, oh, what? How did that get that name? Because that's lovely. But the pictures will help you get your message across and move it forward. That's why I say take photos. Okay, now, before you get started in doing anything, you need to know who your competition is, right? So who is going to be opposed to this? You may have neighbors that don't like the fact that you have a lawn full of dandelions or daisies. You may have some city officials that you know have some issues with what you're trying to do, or community groups. So it's helpful to know who your opponents may be. And then it's also helpful to know those who may be part of your coalition, or could become a part of your coalition, like the beekeepers and the chicken lovers, you know, that got together because they were fighting a common cause. You might be surprised at who you have in your community that would say they're trying to do what? Yeah. Audubon societies. Look at your master gardener groups. If you have a master naturalist group, that's usually a state sponsored group of volunteers that want to plant native plants in communities. Take a look at those kinds of groups that you have in your community and identify somebody in those groups that you can talk to, because you're going to need some alliance down the road. The third thing is preparing yourself. And I've seen a number of people come to our council meetings over the years that couldn't read, didn't have copies of what they wanted. They usually get 3 minutes. Some communities give you 5 minutes. You don't get a lot of time to make your pitch. So before you do anything, you need to sit down and realize that you're basically going to be running a campaign with this group. You're going to first need to create awareness of what the issue is. Then you need to educate people about the issue. Now, don't get into an argument with somebody you have to educate, okay? That's really where a lot of people get sidelined. Just educate them. If somebody wants to argue with you, you just give them information. Do not get into a discussion. Then you're going to go into pitching your plan, and then you're going to ask them for action. So there's 4 steps here that you're going to pursue. Most people go straight to the bottom and fail. So I remind people, start with the awareness. What's the issue? Why is it a problem? And understand that you need to be thinking about this in terms of what's in it for them. Those aldermen that Michelle's been working with, when are they up for election, right? They're elected for 2 years. Some people are elected for 4 years. Understand the cycle that they're in and understand what's in it for them. So if you have a group of you have a coalition of supporters, to them that means voters. So put their hat on for a minute too when you're thinking about how you're going to plan this campaign. So you want a 1-page summary of the issue with your proposed solution. Remember, don't let them come up with the answer. You propose the answer. Include photos. That's probably the best thing you can do. Practice your elevator speech. If you are caught in an elevator with one of these aldermen, how could you tell them the issue in 15 seconds? A lot harder than you can expect to do that. But practice. Talk to your family members, talk to your kids, talk to your dog. Practice saying, we want to feed pollinators. They provide 1 of every 3 bites of food we eat, and yet we're not feeding them. Okay, it can be something that short and sweet, but you need to make it punchy and memorable. Practice your media interviews because that'll give you an idea of your short answers for anybody who asks you. You need to have short answers, easy to remember, summarize the issues, summarize what you want, and practice that so that you're saying it in your sleep. If your spouse says to you, stop saying that, that's where you are. Seriously, you really need to just internalize all of that because you're now the walking billboard for that particular issue. Okay, you've got all of your materials now prepared. Now you're going to start looking at mapping out who you're going to contact. And that's where your list of potential contacts comes in. You're going to look at your local council government. You're going to look at your supporters. You're going to look at your detractors too, because you want to know when they start surfacing, if they surface, and you want to talk about your media. If you don't know who your local media are, all of this is part of doing your research and doing your homework. You need to know who these people are, where they're located, and how they interact with each other. Years ago, we were trying to get a local zoning ordinance changed, and we didn't know that the man who had the property that was in one of a case, his daughter was the newspaper editor. So there was no way the community was going to get any support for the proposed change because it was affecting her dad. So you need to kind of know that, especially if it's an issue that's going to take you some time to develop. And if you start hitting those walls, step back and say, what's going on here? What are the connections? Because sometimes it's that simple. Somebody's related to somebody, or somebody has a relationship of some sort. The other thing you need to do is set up a contact calendar. And when I'm doing something like this, I get one of those, you can buy them at any Home Depot, I'm not Home Depot, Staples, business store. Big calendars that have boxes that are about this big, because then you can mark down in your calendar the things that you need to do day to day to move this issue forward. And you're plotting a campaign here. So you need to start saying, okay, if I've got 2 aldermen, how often am I going to contact them about this particular issue? And you'll start in pencil or with little sticky notes, you can start plotting when you're going to contact them, when the meetings are, when you're going to talk to the people who are your supporters. And having it on a big calendar will help you see how your progress should be evolving. Right. Now, you're going to start talking about the people who can help you. Probably the people who are most obvious and we overlook are our neighbors. Are they okay with what you're proposing? If it's your property, are they the ones who caused the issue, or are they supportive of what you're proposing to do? If they don't even know about the issue, make sure to give them that one-page summary. Let them know what you're doing, because you may find that they like that proposal and they want to do that in their double strip, and they didn't know who was preventing them from doing that. You may be all of a sudden have your whole neighborhood show up, which is what happened to me one time, to support what you're doing. And so don't be afraid to talk to your neighbors and ask them to support you. Secondly, the support groups that you've identified, talk to them. And a lot of people like to do petitions where you ask people to sign petitions. Don't stuff your petition. People will stand at a local grocery store and say, please sign my petition. Don't do that. Especially in a community where people know each other. Six names on a petition can be as impactful, if not more, depending on who they are, versus 20,000 names on a petition. When I was on the city council, we got petitions. Unless we knew people on that petition, it didn't go very far. And so I have used petitions myself, but I've used them very, very strategically. I had the right people signing that petition, and had the what they were signing for and saying they agreed to did not sound legalistic, because a lot of those petitions sound like a lawyer wrote them.
Yeah.
So make it simple, and then have the right people signing. It could be your neighbors. You could have a petition that says, we like Michele's proposal. We'd like to do that in our double strip. And then your neighbors sign it. That is very impactful. So don't overlook doing that when you're talking about petitions. And again, ask them to show support. Some people can't make meetings, but they sure can write a letter or they can write an email. And so don't overlook doing that. The issue with that is you have to tell them before a meeting to send it. A lot of people don't look at their email if they're on a city council until about the week before they're going to look at something. They'll open an email and say, yeah, I know that issue, but it's not ripe yet, right? We're not making a decision. So the best time to have that input from people who support your proposal is right before you're getting ready to go present something. Either present an issue or make them aware or educate them. That's when you want that support to show up. That will then emphasize to the people who are making decisions that you have people who are supporting you. They won't necessarily connect the dots if they get something, 2 months before. So you need to time it a little closer to what you're doing. Sounds like a lot of work, doesn't it? It is. Now, your opposition may be your neighbor. It could be another group. It may be somebody you don't know. But I think when you're practicing, it's important for you to practice what you would say if somebody would come up to you and say, I think this is the craziest idea. I don't support it. Again, there's a tendency to want to argue with that. Your best approach when you have somebody do that is you just repeat, this is an issue that I care about. This is the issue that I'd like to fix. This is my proposal. Just keep it as consistent as you can throughout every conversation you have with somebody. And don't get into an argument with somebody you have to educate, because you're not going to get very far, and you're just going to be entertainment to people. You won't necessarily make your cause any better by doing that. Now, let's say you have neighbors who are against. Okay, if you know your neighbors, sometimes we don't know our neighbors, but it would be helpful if you did know your neighbors, at least by name. Go talk to them. Find out what their issues are. See if there's something that you can help them with, and you both can then work together. If they don't understand what you're doing, I'm a big sign person. Put up signs. I was delighted when Michele found all these other types of signs that are playing through this slide presentation, because those signs make a big difference. If people don't know, if they're not gardeners, they don't have an interest in nature, they have this preconceived idea that a perfect lawn is this grass that you mow every weekend instead of spending time with your family. I'm not a big fan of grass. I have none on my 1-acre hillside. And it doesn't provide any benefits to your pollinators. But they're used to the green carpet as being the standard of garden beauty. The good thing is that's changing. We're seeing a significant number of people, because of the COVID pandemic, go into gardening. We have a number of surveys that show that people now understand the role of pollinators and how important they are to our food supply. So you have that on your side as you try to explain to them what the issue is within your community. And those signs, even if you don't have an issue, I have signs on my property. I'm a monarch way station, I'm a certified wildlife habitat, and I'm obviously an apiary. I have signs so that when people walk by, they know what I'm doing. And they sometimes stop and they talk about, well, what is that? Why do you have that sign up? What is it that you're doing on your property? So that gives you an opportunity to not only make them aware of the issue, but educate them, because that's where that 1-2 punch at the beginning is what's going to get you to where you want to be, educating people. And then when you're talking about groups, there's a tendency to want to just show up someplace and just start talking about what you're doing. Talk with your group leadership first. Let them know if you want the Audubon Society or you want a Master Gardener group. Find out who the president is, or somebody maybe who in your neighborhood who's a Master Gardener like Michele had. Talk to them and see what they think and what power backing they can bring to the table too. You might be surprised at who they know. They may know service clubs that would agree with you on the proposal. So you're looking for alliances, but you're starting in your own, literally in your own backyard. Okay, so you've got all of your lists, you've got your calendar, you've got your 1-page handout. Don't make it more than 1 page with your photos. You've prepared so that you're saying it in your sleep, you're ready to go. So you're gonna start with talking with that list of city government. You're gonna start talking to them one-to-one. You're gonna start talking with your alderman, right? The person who represents your part of the community, and let them understand what you're doing, what the concern is, what the issue is, what you would like to see differently, and see if they can support you. Like Michele had 2 aldermen working with her. You want to identify their concerns. Sometimes you will find when you're talking to them about what you're concerned about, it may be related to something that they were concerned about or some issue that they had the previous year. Make the connection with those, connect those dots with the issues, because that will give you more leverage to move this forward and make a change. If you don't see their concerns in your 1-page summary, take that summary back, change it. Remember, they're going to be your advocates with their peers on that government body. And so you want to make sure that they know what you want change and how you want to change. And then again, pull that calendar out and start scheduling your government meeting presentations, because sometimes they meet only once a month. Sometimes they meet twice a month. Sometimes they have a committee that then listens to an issue and makes a presentation to the big board that actually votes. So find out how your government works. Go to your city manager, your city administrator. I actually like talking to the city clerks because they know how the government works, and they tend to be women and they tend to be helpful. So if you don't know how your government works, find that out, because it's important for you to then be able to use that information to schedule your presentations. Okay. The night's come. You're going to make your presentation. You're a little nervous. That's understandable. If you've never been to where your government meets and it's a city hall or a city council chamber, or go to a meeting that you're not making a presentation and just get the lay of the room. See where people are seated, see where the audience sits. There's usually the department heads usually have a place where they sit, where the media sits. Just scope it out to get comfortable with that particular room. Watch it. If you have televised meetings now with COVID, a lot more of the governments are televising. We've been televising them here for a while. Watch them. Observe how people come up, how long they're given to make their presentation, so that you can then follow the same protocol that other people have been following. That make your life a little easier. So you've got your 1-page summary with your proposed solutions and photos. What I normally do when I'm going to make a presentation, I pass that out before I make my presentation. I say, here you go. This is my issue. If you want them to pay attention to you, though, pass it out after you've finished. Okay? It just depends on what message you're trying to get across. if I have pictures on my one page, I like to give it to them beforehand, because they can then sit there and they're listening to me, but they're looking at the before and after pictures. And that will register with them that it's a better, the after should register that that's a better solution than what they currently have. Listen to discussion. If they just, after you make your presentation, sometimes they'll say, can you, anybody want to ask questions? Or sometimes they'll go into a discussion. Listen to those discussions. Even if they get into an argument, take notes, or better yet, have somebody with you who's sitting in the audience and is taking notes about who supported you or said, yeah, we really think this is a good idea, because it may or may not be your representative. Again, you're trying to connect the dots and build support. So make sure you know who that is, because you're going to then thank them afterwards with either an email or a phone call or even a written thank you note for their support. You're going to encourage support groups to attend the meetings with you. You're going to do what they say, the protocols. You're going to observe time limits. You're going to dress professionally, like a business attire. Don't go in your bee suit or your t-shirt right after gardening. You're going to respect the fact that they are your governing body and you are there to work with them. So you need to dress the part in doing that. You're going to follow up. Again, if you know who your supporters are, you're going to send them emails, thank you notes, maybe a copy of your one-page summary if they haven't received it when you're there. And then you're going to tie a bow around that presentation, and you're going to track it. You're going to pay attention to every time that it comes up on an agenda. You're going to look at the agenda. They normally track an issue by having it as old business. If they decide they're going to deal with it, they're going to say, okay, we're going to put it, it'll come first as new business, and then they may have a discussion, and then it will move into the agenda as old business. You need to understand their process that they follow and track the issue through this little journey within the community. Now, sometimes people like to work with media, and I'm cautious about that. If you can make a difference by having a one-on-one conversation with the city administrator, the city engineer, your legal office, Michele, good luck with that.
Yeah.
But you know, if you can make a difference by having that one-on-one conversation, that's the best way to go. Or even small groups. Your support group that may be talking to a group of city councilmen, that's the way to go. But sometimes you get to a point where you know you need to leverage your issue with those people running for office, and that's where media comes in. Sometimes the media also will pick up on your issue because they're interested in it. They know that this is an issue maybe the community's dealt with before, or it's an issue that people have an emotional attachment to it. Anything with puppies and kittens, for example, usually gets media attention. So understand that may get you some additional attention. Have that one-page summary that you share with them. Be prepared to answer their questions. And if you don't know something, don't pretend like you do, just say so. And most media will acknowledge that. And then follow up with them if there's a question that you feel that it's within your ballpark to answer. And understand that the story that they may do may or may not reflect what you're trying to do. So you may have to deal with some corrections and understanding where they're coming from. And that just complicates your issue. Sometimes the media do get it correct, and then that helps you. But you're juggling, you're gambling a little bit with that. But if you really need to put pressure on somebody, this is the last resort. Don't go here first. Make sure that that all the other contacts within your organizational structure of your community. Because if you get to the mayor, for example, I've watched this a number of years, he'll say, so did you talk to your councilman? Well, no. The mayor will go to talk to your councilman first. Start there. He's there to represent you. So don't jump the hoops. Walk through, understand the organizational structure, and walk through it. Even if they say no, just say thank you very much and go on to the next level. It'll save you time in the long run. Okay, so tracking your proposals. Again, this could be a long haul. Michele, my gosh, how many years have you been on this one?
Yes, 2 years.
Okay, 2 years. Oh, you're young at this. So seriously, it can take a while because it's a bureaucracy, right? You're dealing with a bureaucracy. You're dealing with a legal office that's there just to keep the city out of trouble sometimes. They're really not there to help you. And so You need to tie that ribbon around that proposal and keep a close eye on where it's going. Follow up with your elected supporters, thank them for their help. Don't thank them because you think you're going to have to help them, ask for their help again. You may just thank them. You know, every step that you take, thank them for their help. Thank them for being there for you, and be honest about the thank you. Don't do it because you think you're going to need them again. You may not. You don't know. You don't know if you will or not. So that's a very important one. Anybody watched a House of Cards? Okay, Kevin Spacek. And so that's about politics in Washington. And if you're not into politics, this might sound a little crazy, but when you're looking at your councilman board, and let's say you have 10, and you have 2 per area of your community, and the 2 aldermen that Michelle's been talking about, she knows they're in her corner. So now you got to start looking at the other 8 that are on that board. Normally in government structures, a simple majority is enough to pass something or change something. That means 6 votes out of 10. Sometimes you need a supermajority. That can be 7 votes out of 10. Again, understand how your government body makes decisions, what kind of vote it takes. A nuisance ordinance change is usually a simple majority. So you don't need to convince 10 people. You just need 6, right? 5 plus 1. So concentrate on those 6 people. You already got 2. So that means you need to work on 3 plus 1 and start looking at who potentially on that board can work with your alderman. And sometimes they'll recommend people that you should talk to. They'll say, you know, Peter over there in Ward 4 really likes gardening. You may want to go talk to him. So talk to them, understand who else you might be able to get on your side, count your votes, and be patient with the process. It won't happen overnight. That's where you've ended up with a nuisance ordinance because somebody else complained. So don't come in with a complaint, come in with a solution. Come in with something that's bigger and better than one you already have. And people tend to gravitate to that more positive approach than to one where you're constantly being negative.
Okay. Well, and on that, I think when we were working with our coalition on these urban ag ordinances, I think in hindsight, it was too much.
Yes.
We really needed to have pared it down, but it's because the way the city community officer really went after chickens and beekeepers, and it really was just ludicrous the way they set it up. They were going to have the animal control warden confiscate nuisance beehives.
Oh, I love that. I want to come see that.
Yeah, that's so I expressed a lot of concern for that gentleman's life because he was going to get killed trying to pick up a hive, and then the city was going to create its own nuisance. But I think in hindsight, we took on too much, but that was also at those 2 city councilmen who heard a lot from the farming side too, and so they took on too much.
Right.
And I really think it needs to be whittled down to, let's deal with daisies, goldenrod, and milkweed first.
Right. Yes. You want to have a success. You want to have a small success. And once you have that, and if they see people, those supporters that you have, if they're also telling them that they're happy with this, remember they're voters, right? For these people are looking for votes. You can then take the next step. Right. You don't want to take the whole elephant at once. And if you have an issue like that, where you have 2 issues that get related to each other, separate them. Have somebody who's going to be working on the daisies and the goldenrod, and let the other issue take its own path. Mm-hmm. But that's why I say stay focused. Track your issue. And it's easy to get rolled into a whole slew of other things. But if you have that very distinct focus of what success is for you, what is success for you? As Michele just said, success for her was getting daisies and goldenrods approved, right? Not defined as noxious weeds. Have what success is for you, and keep that in mind as you're progressing through the system, because it can get complicated and you can lose your way. So issues can also, as she said, delay what you're trying to do. And when I've had that happen in some of my issues, I will either take on the simpler one or take on the more complicated one, find somebody else to be the spokesman for the one that we started out with. We never lose sight of what the original intent was of raising the issue. And it's easy to get sidetracked. Absolutely.
Well, and I think too, when we look at having, you made educating the policymakers such an important task, whether it's the detractors or the policymakers, you've got to educate them. And when, again, we were trying to educate on all of urban ag. So we had to educate them about beekeeping. We had to educate them about chickens, about small tractors, about how easy it was or wasn't to just get a faucet on a fire hydrant for water at the community garden. It started to become too many things to educate them about.
Right.
So I think breaking it down into the little wins.
I like that.
Lead to the big wins. So you start with the little ones of, okay, we have 3 flowers, 3 flowers that bees like. And what was interesting is also the council people, all of them had planted their own devil strips. They didn't realize they were in violation of their own city ordinance. And they all had milkweed. So you pull them in that way. And then certainly, I think, again, in trying to find out their solutions to problems, as I discussed with you, in our community, we have a big issue with the combined storm sewers and stormwater and sewer. So we are desperately trying to reduce the amount of stormwater going into the sewer system. Planting pollinator habitat does that.
Excellent solution.
Right. So you promote that, because that is one of those things that I saw a number of people eyes light up going, really? It stops a lot of water? Yes. You don't have to water the lawns. And it's great in all these retention or large drainage areas they're creating that they could put in pollinator habitat,
right,
which will kind of survive the too much water suddenly dumped in there, but it will pull it up. So it does provide that extra.
That's the what's in it for them.
Yes. Yeah.
And you really need to think that through, because it's easy to go and complain and say, well, this is what we have now. This is what I want. But you need to then say, but what's in it for them?
Right.
And represent the issue, not as a complaint necessarily, but as a bigger and better solution.
Right.
And talk up in terms of what it will do for them in the community.
Right.
And it's surprising how you just rephrasing the issue can get it forward a little faster too.
Yeah, because even with the whole vacant lot issue, which certainly that happened a lot after the foreclosure crisis in 2008, it's so many vacant lots that then got overgrown. But in my neighborhood, we have 2 vacant lots that are, because we have a high peat concentration in the soil, they're wet all the time. So the Japanese knotweed, an invasive weed, but it loves that. So it draws up that water. So it's reducing then mosquito health issues.
Sure.
So it's educating also. We started to morph into educating the council of allow those, while some of them, yes, are invasive weeds, but now my goldenrod is spreading down to that vacant lot so that it's absorbing standing water, preventing then neighborhood health issues.
Yes.
And saving the community health district money because they don't have to spray for mosquitoes as often.
That's an excellent reason.
Yeah.
And it's a win-win.
It is.
In the community with a better solution for the water runoff issue, and you're also getting your pollinator food.
Right. Yeah.
So.
Yep.
Well, I'm curious to see what you do, what your strategy is for this year, Michele.
Yeah, well, it is, starting small. And one thing I will say, because I've done this a number of times now across the country, because many of our state and local governments are on Zoom, you can either just call in to give your presentation over Zoom, but again, prepare ahead of time. You may have 2 to 3 minutes and they're timing you.
Oh, yeah.
But you can get those advocates like someone from the National Audubon or Sierra Club or Pollinator Partnership or someone to call in and give their 2 minutes, because they can be in Oregon and still give you that national support for your issue.
Nice.
I've done this in Massachusetts and Rhode Island, but as Charlotte said, if you have 2 minutes, take 2 minutes. I have often presented during different city councils, and I have my written presentation, which I give them the full thing after I've given my 2 minutes. So I have my own copy. I've really marked up, so it's only 2 minutes long.
Right.
Because they, in city of Akron, they have a huge clock that counts down the time of how much time you have left. So you know how much time you have left. And at the same time, it was interesting. I gave some testimony in Rhode Island, and the chairperson of the committee said, okay, we have your written testimony. Tell me something new. Do not read me your letter.
Oh,
So
right.
you had to be prepared
Yes.
right then and there to give them something else. But it also allowed us, as you said, listen to your detractors. There were a number of us all on the same side, so that we could answer the opposition right on the fly in our 2 minutes. So you do want to be prepared. You've got to have that elevator speech. But with Zoom meetings and things, you can either send in by email your written testimony, but you can also log in and give your 2 minutes, but really practice something and make sure it is 2 minutes.
What I was going to say, if you can address your detractors calmly and with a vision of what that you express to them, that you understand their vision and their concern, and you honor that, but then you also explain to them what a better option is, you don't know how much you go up in esteem from your politicians who are also used to dealing with those people and don't always get the same result. But if you can address that, it doesn't really matter what you're saying. You'll get the attention of the politicians because they have to deal with that a lot.
Yes.
And sometimes not very well. So if you can do it well, that's another step in the right direction.
Right. Yes. Well, and I think originally when they proposed that $50 per beehive and per chicken, my empathy toward the animal control person, I think really helped us a lot, because it showed that I was concerned for his health, and he was not a beekeeper. And I even said, do you have this equipment and this and this? And do you realize how heavy a hive is? I'm concerned you're going to kill your employee. So I think it helped in that, because really the mayor withdrew that legislation the next day.
Right.
Yeah.
You don't realize when you go before a body like that, they see you as an expert of some sort, whatever the topic is, because obviously you have a concern with what they're doing, and then you have a solution for what you think is a better alternative for whatever it is they're doing. And if you do a well-planned presentation, and like you did, Michele, and you looked out for the interests of the animal control officer, that will make a big impact down the road as you continue to track your issue with them. Because it says that you are able to think on your feet, you're being practical, you've demonstrated concern for somebody else, and all of that adds up. Because they're getting to know you. They may not know you if this is the first time you've gone and interacted with your government. So they're going to spend a little time observing you and getting to know you. That's why it's really important to be really well prepared, so you make a good first impression.
Right. Yes. Yeah. Well, I do want to say we're closing in on the 9 o'clock hour, and certainly there is our contact information that if you want to reach out to Charlotte to also get her advice on gardening where she is out in Missouri. And then again, look at that handout that we sent you, because it has links to all of these signs that you saw throughout the presentation, so that when you do plant your own habitat, I encourage you, like Charlotte said, get those signs, because it's an educational tool. And I'm going to put out the little sign on the noxious weed, or the height of things in the devil strip, because I think most people have no clue in my community that nothing can be more than 4 inches tall, whether it's your address sign or grass.
Wow.
Really, nothing can be more than 4 inches tall in the devil strip.
Okay, that's not very tall.
That is not, no.
Okay, that's 4 inches.
Right. And,
I mean,
and even your lawn care people will say you should cut high so that your grass is at 4 inches.
Right. That's not very,
no.
That's a very antiquated.
Exactly. So, it's again, educating folks based on the science of, and again, if you want to have a healthy yard that doesn't have a lot of bug issues and it doesn't need watered, you want higher grass.
Right.
So, so look into these, certainly these different ways to certify your pollinator habitat. If you have any questions, certainly you can reach out to Charlotte. She can be reached at gardeningscharlotte, is that .com?
Yes.
Yes, .com. So if, I don't know, Terry, if you can unmute yourself, if there was anybody in the chat who had any questions. Oh, does he have to?
I do not see any questions in the chat.
Okay, we have some shy folks. But feel free to reach out to us. We encourage everyone, just because I had this minor incident with mine, I don't expect it to derail my habitat. It's been around for 8 years. It's won awards. So I just need to adjust my strategy. But, you know, I think everyone needs to be aware. You work with your community to make those changes. We will be having a presentation about creating a bee city USA, or a bee campus, which is another way to help educate your community to change their landscaping issues so that, and guidelines, so that you can plant for pollinators and we can have a healthier environment in our communities.
And
So our next,
that's an
yeah.
excellent program. It's well planned. I've worked with other communities who've done it. It's easy to execute. You just get, again, you have to get your support groups around it, get a little bit of money to be able to buy your signs, and you're off.
Right,
So.
right. And it's really such an education process. And I was talking with the Bee City folks today, and my community is a Tree City USA, which they referred to that as kind of the entry drug for becoming a Bee City USA. Yeah. So kind of a wrong choice, but I looked at it as, okay, the chicken people usually go and get ordinances to have chickens before the beekeepers. So that's how I looked at it. So if your city's already a Tree City USA, they understand that concept, and it's easy to then kind of transfer them into a Bee City USA. And it, again, it makes things so much easier, but we have got to plant for our pollinators. So we will certainly, we have April 12th, a Login to Learn webinar with Jeremy Troyer. He is going to be discussing the insurance risks for beekeepers, farmers, and member associations, so that you can make sure you are protected in your small business or with your member association. And our next Creating Pollinator Habitat webinar is Wednesday, April 21st with Tamara Rial, and she's going to discuss the value of being a steward of all the pollinators, not just honeybees. So thank you very much, everybody, for coming again this evening. Feel free to check out any of our pay-per-view presentations if you want to look at some of those again. And for those Pollinator Habitat webinar series, folks, we will see you Wednesday, April 21st. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a great evening.
Good luck. Bye.
Bye.